So, in the previous videos, we understood about the age of Chaucer, and the early Middle English period was something that we discussed. Today, let us talk about the late Middle English period. So, today we will be talking about this period called as the late Middle English period. So, what is the time period? It is from 14th century till 16th century that this period is there. It is also called as the High Middle Ages. And also, during this time, England had number of episodes. For example, the Great Famine in 1315 till 17. Then, of course, we also talked about this incident of Black Death. Black Death 1348 onwards was the time period. Then, of course, there was the 100 years war. This time period is 1337 till 1435. There was another event that happened called as the Peasants' Revolt. Peasants' Revolt in 1381. Okay. Now, the next event that I wanted to highlight was the fall of Constantinople. The fall of Constantinople happened in the year of 1453, and after that there was the invention of printing press and the War of the Roses, culminating to the period of Renaissance as well as Reformation. But what exactly is this fall of Constantinople? So Constantinople है क्या? Constantinople is basically the capital. Constantinople is the capital of ईस्टर्न रोमन एम्पायर. ईस्टर्न रोमन एम्पायर है, उसका कैपिटल है कॉल्ड एज बाइजेंटियम. सो जो बाइजेंटियम जगह है उसके कैपिटल को हम क्या कहते हैं? कॉन्स्टेनोपोल. दिस वॉज फाउंडेड बाय द एम्परर कॉन्स्टेंटाइन वन इन द 4th century AD में ये बना था, राइट. It is also called as the second Rome, and this was the place where culture, trade, and learning became extremely proficient. Then it was the time period of 1453 when the emperor of this region was defeated by the Ottoman Turkish Sultan. So जो Turkish Sultan थे, Muhammad II, he defeated this area, right? The Christians subsequently lost their territories to the Ottoman Turks. This means that this area of Byzantium, or you can say the capital Constantinople, which was a rich area where a lot of priests, a lot of bishops were living here, and ये literary area भी बहुत important था. यहाँ पे culture, trade, as well as literature, ये सब चीज़ें बहुत ज़्यादा फेमस थी. लर्निंग का ये एक सेंटर था. यहाँ पे जब अटैक किया तो अ लॉट ऑफ पीपल टुक अवे द बुक्स दैट वर देयर एंड दे देन स्टार्टेड टू स्प्रेड एजुकेशन. द डिफीट ऑफ द बाइजेंटियम एम्परर gave rise to the Ottoman Empire here, and also we saw that the Christian monks, जितने भी monks थे, they fled towards the eastern area. वो कहाँ जाते हैं? वो ईस्टर्न एरिया की तरफ, ईस्ट की तरफ जाते हैं. And subsequently, we saw the spreading of learning that happened, and this led to humanism as well as Renaissance to come to be propagated in the European Empire, as well as somehow it will travel to England also. Then there was the invention of printing press. So when I talk about printing, सबसे पहले प्रिंटिंग कहाँ होती है? चाइना में स्टार्ट होती है. सो इनिशियली इट वॉज चाइना दैट स्टार्टेड printing in the 3rd century AD, and this method was very, very tedious and very difficult. After that, we have the Koreans who started to print. The movable printing press was first introduced in Europe by the German artist. So हमारे German artist हैं Gutenberg, ग्यूटेनबर्ग. सो ग्यूटेनबर्ग सबसे पहले यूरोप के अंदर लेके आते हैं प्रिंटिंग प्रेस को. एंड बिकॉज ऑफ द प्रिंटिंग प्रेस द बाइबल स्टार्टेड टू गेट produced as well as translated. So it was the Vulgate Bible. कौन सी बाइबल थी? Vulgate बाइबल थी जो प्रिंट होने लगी. Vulgate Bible was printed in 1456, which is also called as the Gutenberg Bible. This Bible became very famous. Gutenberg was the one who got printing press in England. Okay. So you also need to remember that सबसे पहले चाइना स्टार्ट करता है प्रिंटिंग. चाइना के बाद it was basically the Koreans who started to print. But after that यूरोप के अंदर भी प्रिंटिंग प्रेस इंट्रोड्यूस करा जाता है. So for the first time text including the Bible were also printed, and as Bible was printed and now available to a number of masses, Reformation आने लगता है. Now what exactly is Reformation? Reformation is related to religion. उस टाइम पे it was only the church, the pope that was famous, and the Christianity and the branch of Christianity called as Catholicism was followed. They thought that whatever pope said was true, because जो भी उस टाइम पे बाइबल थी was only in the hands of these clergymen or the monks or the pope, मतलब जितनी भी higher authority थी, and masses were not available. Masses were not given the chance to read. The Bible was not available to these masses, and it was not at all written in English, जो कि vernacular हो और ज़्यादा लोगों को पता हो. So we will talk about the printing of Bible also. Please remember this. I will talk about Reformation a little bit there. But Reformation for now you can understand that ये तब आता है जब printing press basically vernacular languages में आ जाती है, and a lot of people got a chance to read it. Okay, then there is this very important figure called as William Caxton. उनका birth date is 1492. William Caxton was an English merchant diplomat. He was a translator, and he started to print books. And इनका printing press आता है England में, where in Westminster. So Westminster इंग्लैंड के अंदर इन 1476 सबसे पहले इनका प्रिंटिंग प्रेस आता है. एंड ही प्रिंटेड द फर्स्ट बुक इन बेल्जियम इन 1473. एंड देन वी ऑल्सो सॉ दैट यहाँ पे इन्होंने वेस्टमिंस्टर प्रेस पे सबसे पहले क्या प्रिंट किया था. सो ही प्रिंटेड चॉसर्स, द कैंटरबरी टेल्स, राइट. After this, of course, the War of the Roses also started. So Wars of Roses started. It was like a civil war. It was a civil war that was fought between two branches of the same dynasty. Plantagenet dynasty थी. उनकी दो branches हैं. We have the Red Rose and we have the White Rose. The Red Rose, they are called as Lancaster, and the White Rose, they are called as the York. So York और Lancaster same dynasty है, उनकी ही दो branches हैं, and they were fighting. That is why this period is also called as the Civil War period. 1455 till 1485 is the time, right? And this resulted in the establishment of Tudor dynasty. इसकी वजह से Tudor dynasty establish करी गई. And in 1455 we know that King Henry VI held the throne in 1455. His grandfather Henry IV had seized into power in 1399. Richard, the Duke of York, then claimed the throne. After that, it was Richard who claimed the throne. Richard was killed in the battle in 1460, but his son Edward the fourth came on the throne, right? He crushed the Lancasters and ruled till 1470. In 1470, Lancaster's Queen Margaret of Anjou brought back Henry. So it was Queen Margaret of Anjou who brought back Henry the Sixth. एंड ये कौन है? लैनचेस्टर की क्वीन है, लैनचेस्टर की क्वीन है. 7 months later, we saw Edward, who returned and regained the power. After him, his brother, Richard III ruled. Richard III was killed. This person, Richard III, was killed by Henry Tudor, also called as Henry VII. He put an end to the War of Roses and established the Tudor rule. और यहीं से ही Tudor dynasty start होती है. It was the Tudor rule or the Tudor dynasty that came into picture. There are other major kings also. Let us talk about the major kings that are there in the medieval period. It is important to know about them, then only बाकी सब चीज़ें समझ आएंगी. So सबसे पहले we all know that it was Edward the Confessor who was on the throne. He was the last of the Anglo-Saxon king. He promised Duke of Normandy that he will be given the throne. But इनको देने की बजाय इन्होंने अपने सन हैरल्ड को थ्रोन दे दिया था. So Duke of Normandy wages a war that is called as the Norman Conquest, right? Danish Viking settlement थी जो नॉर्दर्न फ्रांस की, वहाँ से ये लोग आए थे, the Normans, and then they came. The Battle of Hastings, we have already talked about it. The Battle of Hastings started in 1066, right? And ultimately William the Conqueror ruled from 1066 till 1087. Okay. After that we had Henry VII who came on the throne. This picture is of Henry VII. Henry VII is the one who came up with this house of Plantagenet. It was a very prominent medieval royal society or the royal lineage in the medieval England, and in the time of revolts they all were there, and the political tensions were all carried forward from here. There was a very big controversy that happened, that is the Becket controversy. So Henry II appointed Thomas Becket, his chancellor and his old friend, as the archbishop. इन्होंने इन्हें क्या बोला कि ये क्या बन जाए, आर्चबिशप बन जाए, आर्चबिशप ऑफ कैंटरबरी. ओके. In an attempt to assert his rights over church, ताकि वो चर्च के ऊपर रूल कर पाए. अब चर्च के ऊपर इस टाइम पे अगर हम चर्च की बात करें तो चर्च के ऊपर तो पोप का रूल है, बट हेनरी वांटेड that Thomas Becket should become the archbishop so that he can exert the power over church. But Becket turned out to be the supporter of church rights only. But क्या किया, Becket ने भी church को support कर लिया. The conflict between the two came to be a major massacre, and a remark made by Henry is said to have been misinterpreted. जब हेनरी ने एक रिमार्क दिया, and there were four knights who killed the archbishop to death, and it was this date of 29 December 1170 Thomas Becket was killed. The incident horrified the Christian Europe and Becket was hailed as a martyr. Henry had to make a settlement with the papacy after that, but ultimately his shrine was created. And this is the same Thomas Becket जहाँ पे you see the pilgrims coming in Canterbury Tales. Okay. After this we had another king called as Richard and he was called as the Lionheart. He was called as the Lionheart. 1189 to 1199. King Richard I, उनका पूरा नाम क्या है? Richard I, also called as the Lionheart. Why? Because he was a great warrior. Especially he went to a number of crusades. After that, we had King John. King John ruled from 1199 till 1216. Right? He again was a major king. And King John के ऊपर ही शेक्सपियर ने एक वर्क भी लिखा है. If you remember, it's a play called as King John. Then we have Edward II, who ruled from 1307 to 1327. Edward II, who was the son of Edward I, who conquered Wales. So, Edward I basically conquered Wales. He is the one who expelled Jews from England, and he is the one who also established the parliament as a permanent institution. So these are the 3 to 4 things that are in depth given to Edward I, right? It was rumored to, it was said that ye shayad he was a bisexual and he was infatuated towards his own friend, right? But this rule of Edward II was a disastrous rule. But why Edward II is important? He is a king who established the Oxford University as well as the Cambridge University. इनके अंडर ही ये दोनों यूनिवर्सिटीज़ आती हैं, right? He was probably murdered, and also remember that it is Marlowe जिन्होंने इनके ऊपर play लिखा था called as Edward II. So it's a play written by whom? By Marlowe. Again, this is important. Then we have Edward III. He ruled from 1327 till 1377. Edward III. Edward III was the son of Edward II. Edward II. He laid claim on the French throne, which led to the 100-Year War, and it was during him जब 100-Year War होता है from 1337 to 1453, right? Chaucer was born during his reign only, and Chaucer, जिनका time period is this, was born during his reign. After that, we had Richard II, who ruled from 1377 till 1399. He is the one who ruled. So Richard II came into power. So he came to power at the age of 10. He was only 10 years old जब इनको थ्रोन पे लाया जाता है. He was the grandson of Edward III, the son of Edward the Black Prince. He was the son of Edward the Black Prince. Okay, look at this picture. So we have Edward the Black Prince and उनके बेटे थे who became the King of England from 1377 till 1399. If you can see, so as I told you, we have Edward the Black Prince, उनके बेटे, let me write down. So it is Richard II who came on the throne from 1377 till 1399. I hope this is clear. Right? John of Gaunt was the Duke of Lancaster, who was a very influential nobleman. Right? He was the nephew of that person only. So he was the nephew of John of Gaunt. John of Gaunt was the Duke of Lancaster. He is so famous. Why? Because he was the patron of Chaucer. That is why I told you about him. शेक्सपियर ऑल्सो रोट अ प्ले रिचर्ड द टू. शेक्सपियर ने भी वर्क लिखा है रिचर्ड द टू. आफ्टर दैट हु बिकेम द किंग? सो एडवर्ड द ब्लैक प्रिंस के बेटे रिचर्ड द टू बिकेम द किंग. एंड आफ्टर दैट वी हैव हेनरी द फोर्थ, राइट, हु बिकेम द किंग. सो वी हैव हेनरी द फोर्थ जो 1399 से 1413 तक रूल करते हैं. ही वॉज द सन ऑफ जॉन ऑफ गॉन्ट एंड ब्लांच, एंड ही वॉज द फर्स्ट लेंचेस्टेरियन किंग. ये फर्स्ट लेंचेस्टेरियन किंग के नाम से फेमस हैं. वी हैव शेक्सपियर हु हैज़ रिटन द वर्क हेनरी द सिक्स्थ in 2 parts. Okay. After this, we have Henry the V. Henry the V that came on the throne. So he rebelled against his father Henry the Fourth. इन्होंने क्या किया? Henry the Fourth के against rebel किया था. So he rebelled against him. He played an active role in the 100-year war also. Unexpectedly he died in France, and Shakespeare wrote the work Henry the Fourth in 2 parts as well as Henry the Five, and पूरी उनकी ही lineage के बारे में इन्होंने लिखा था. Henry the Five के बाद we have Henry the Sixth. Henry the Sixth who ruled from 1422 right, so it is 1470 till 14 and no, basically date ऐसे लिख लो. So he is going to rule from 1422 till 1470. ठीक है. So काफ़ी कम टाइम इन्होंने रूल करा. Only son, and he was the infant son of Henry the Fifth. He was a very small person who ruled. He was very weak. And very peaceful ruler. And his queen, Margaret of Anjou, basically ruled for most of the time. Right? So the War of the Roses started during this time only, and England was defeated in the 100-year war, and he was on the throne during that time. But ultimately we see that he is very weak. लेकिन इनकी queen जो है, Queen of Margaret, या फिर Queen Margaret of Anjou, she was very very strong. Right? Then we have, so after he ruled for some time, we had then the next king that came into power was Edward the Fourth. It was Edward the Fourth that came on the throne. Edward the Fourth. He was the son of Richard. ये किसके सन थे? Richard के सन थे. He was the son of Richard, who was the Duke of York. So अब कौन सी साइड आ गई थ्रोन पे? यॉर्क साइड आ गई. एंड ही वॉज द ब्रदर ऑफ रिचर्ड द थर्ड ऑल्सो. रिचर्ड द थर्ड के ब्रदर थे. राइट? सो रिचर्ड द थर्ड एज वेल एज एडवर्ड सिक्स. Printing was brought to England during the time of Edward IV. So he destroyed the House of Lancaster during the War of Roses, and the only rival was Henry Tudor, who went to exile. तो उस टाइम पे इनके सिर्फ एक ही राइवल थे, that is Henry Tudor, and Henry Tudor went for exile, and after the यू कैन से द रूल ऑफ लैनचेस्टर, जो ये वाली पार्टी थी, उसके बाद इट वॉज एडवर्ड द फोर्थ हु केम ऑन द थ्रोन एंड ही वॉज फ्रॉम द हाउस ऑफ यॉर्क. The brother Richard the Third is also very famous. Okay, after him, when he ruled till 18, so from 1461 till 1483. After that, we have Richard the Third, who came on the throne from 183 1485 tak. He was the last of the Plantagenet king also. He was killed by the Lancaster Henry the Seventh. ठीक है, so he was killed by Henry the Seventh. Henry the Seventh ने Henry the Seventh ने इन्हें किल कर दिया था. Right, in the battle of Bosworth, right, it was the final battle when it came to the battle of or the war of the roses. So ये कौन सी battle थी? The battle of Bosworth के अंदर war of roses was coming to an end. Shakespeare also wrote a play on Richard III depicting the king to be the most villainous of all the kings. He is considered as the most villainous of all the kings that were there. He was a murderer. He was a deformer, etc. And of course, he had a deformed body. His skeleton was found very recently in 2013. So he became the king, and last May we saw that at the end it would be the Tudor dynasty that would come, and the Tudor dynasty would be inaugurated, and Richard the Third would be the last of the villainous king that would be there. Okay, I hope this is clear. Right, so these were the king. Also यूरोप के अंदर भी काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें चल रही थी. So in Europe also number of things were going on. For example, Dante was writing. Right, Dante was writing. So many beautiful things were written during this time only. Pilgrim's Progress was written by Bunyan. And so the Middle English period अपने आप में बहुत बहुत important period बनता है. We will be talking about it in greater detail. Dante उस टाइम पे लिख रहे थे 1265 से 1321 फ्लोरेंस इटली के अंदर ही इज़ राइटिंग. दांते का द डिवाइन कॉमेडी हम डिस्कस करेंगे. And of course the three parts that are there. Then we have Patriarch, who is also writing from 1304 to 74. This was also important. And ultimately in the next video I will be talking about Chaucer in greater detail. So ये सारी चीज़ें कहाँ चल रही थी? It was going on in the European Empire, but in England we had Chaucer who was writing. So in the next class, I will be talking about Chaucer. I hope you guys understood what all was happening in the background, how there were multiple kings and queens, and this is the family tree of the War of Roses. The Lancaster and the York side were fighting with one another. एडमंड ट्यूडर के बेटे ही थे. ठीक है, ट्यूडर किंग के फर्स्ट किंग हेनरी दी सेवेंथ then will be coming on the throne, and ultimately it is the Tudor dynasty that will be there, that we have already discussed. So Tudor dynasty का establishment हो जाएगा. In the next coming classes we'll be talking about that as well. Okay, so I hope you understood these things. This is the history of the late Middle English, and in the next class I will be talking about the works of Chaucer, and also this thing also I'll be talking about the general prologue, and we'll be discussing about Canterbury Tales in greater detail. Okay, so with this I will wind up the class. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye bye.